right, so the question is, what is a closure and how do I know how to use them? So um, with that example, you like that? I'm glad. I hope that example helps you. Let me go ahead and re-explain it for YouTube, so stick around. So a friend here is asking about closures, and it's actually easier to start out with building up to a closure. Okay, so we're going to do this. I'm going to do this over again just one more time for everybody. So we have a variable and it's in package. It's in package scope. Closures are all about scope, right? And they're, generally speaking, they're usually thought of as a way to get around privately scoped things. And let me show you what I mean. So first we have a function call. We say, we say age, right? And it returns an integer and it just returns a myage. All right, now, and then down here we have our main function. I'm going to put this back. Actually, we already have an age here. I'm going to have to comment that out. We'll get to that one. That's the more advanced one. All right, so the first thing here we have is, okay, so we have age, fmt.Println, and you can do this with any language. Any language is the same thing. We're going to print the output of age. All right, now there will be somebody out there in the YouTube comments who's going to complain and say, no, that's not a closure. And I'd appreciate hearing why they think so. But to my way of thinking, this is a closure. Age is a closure. Now, most of the time when people think of closures, they think about it in enclosing something that's private. But in this case, it's enclosing a value that's public that can be changed. It's still a closure. A closure just means there is something, a function or something wrapped around the scope of the thing. So this says print age, as far as I know. So if I run this, we get 20, right? Now that's so basically we're pulling. This is bad functional programming, by the way, right? We're pulling this variable into our function. And the thing is, the reason that some people will have problem with this being a closure is that if I change the value, it can change. And I'm pretty sure there's some people out there that are going to say, well, and that makes it not a closure, right? Somebody out there is going to say, well, that there you go. That makes it so it's not a closure. Because a closure is supposed to kind of encapsulate something away. It can't ever be changed. Hey, how are you? Also stated in Go, a closure is a function value that references a variable from outside its body. Does it actually say that? Thank you for finding that. I feel better now. I feel validated. But usually when people talk about closures, they're going to use this next convoluted example. Like gets people very confused. Okay, so as we've said, we've got documentation now from the Go development site that says this is a closure. A closure is a function that references a variable outside or potentially inside its scope. So this is enclosing this variable and it's making it public, right? Now, here's the thing. Look, if I make this a public function, right? If I make this a public function, if I export it by making the capital A, it's that internal value of 54 is now exported so that anybody who calls this thing gets this value. They can't change this value because it's private. So that's one of the usual properties of a closure is you can't get to it, right? But strictly speaking, I think it doesn't matter. I think you could do it without it. All right, so let's get back to the more traditional example. So, these are all in the same file, so it's actually hard to emphasize. It's actually hard to show you the scope changes. But so let's do the next thing, right? So another way that you more commonly will hear about a closure is that the number itself will be inside of here, right? And they'll have myage equals 54, and it'll return myage, right? Well, actually, let's leave myage out here, right? And we'll say, well, let's say we want to have our own age here. First of all, you know about this, right? If I do this, myage equals 20 now, what's the number going to be? It's going to be 20 because of the scope, right? So now myage it's not really a closure. It's just a local variable. It is sort of, but here's where it becomes a closure in the textbook sense. Let's say instead of returning myage, we want to make a function. So we could say someage equals function that returns an int, and we're going to make it return myage. Okay. Once again, here we have a closure, except for this time, it's not enclosing something outside of the function. It's including something inside of the function, right? And then here you could just return someage, right? And we should get the same result there. That should be 20, right? And I want you to just notice here that myage clobbers this guy, and it gets hard-coded into this, right? Well, it gets even more fun. If you use a first-class function, then we return the reference to the function instead of the function itself, right? We don't actually call it. We return itself. We return a function, first-class function. And so now we return a func int, right? And now to get the value down here, we have to do this, because we have to call age that returns the function, and then we have to grab the value from the function. And that is also, I think this is one of the reasons people get confused by closures, because people, when they usually talk about closures, this is what they usually, what I've read anyway. The simple definition was the first one we did, but this is usually what you'll see. You'll see, usually when someone's talking about a closure, first of all, they're not talking about a variable. They're almost, I don't know, in the Python world, when I was doing it, when I was teaching kids, a lot of times, this function is enclosed. It's a first-class function that's enclosed inside of here. By the way, in Go, you can't do this. You can't do, I can't do it this way. So Python, you can. Python, you can, actually. In Python, you can do this. You can do someage like this, right? In fact, you have to do it this way. Python's a little weird. Python will let you do this. Go will not. It's like, no, sorry, buddy. It's like, no, sorry, buddy. You cannot declare functions in the same way inside of functions. And I actually really, really like that. In Python, you can totally do that. In fact, you have to do that. Python does not let you assign anonymous functions to values. This is one of the greatest hindrances of Python, in my opinion. In my opinion, Python is very, very remedial when it comes to first-class functions, because you cannot do them. You have to give every function in Python a name before, you can assign that name as a symbol, but you can't, you have to define it in this like lame-ass way. You can't do the JavaScript and Go and C way where you assign it an anonymous function, and this symbol over here becomes the name of the function. I really love that, because that emphasizes that a function is just any other data type. You can throw it around and pass it around and do whatever. It's just like anything else, like integers or strings or anything. And the variable it's supposed to be the same. So, but it's not. And in Go, it's Go, C, Rust, JavaScript all allow you to do this. In Python, you can't. Python, you cannot do that. So, in fact, in Go is so sticklery about this that that's a single line function. It's not the same. Yeah, a single line function, lambdas are not the same as anonymous functions. They are anonymous functions, but they are, as soon as you add 3 lines to it, you can't do it anymore. It's actually one of my biggest complaints about Python. Python cannot do multi-line anonymous functions. In fact, if you want to get a good laugh, go dig through the news group, the mailing list of emails, news groups, the email thread. Go look through the archive at when they tried to add that. They tried to add multi-line anonymous functions, and they got really tripped up on whitespace. And at the end, there's this huge long thread between Guido and everybody, and then they finally, at the end of it, they just went, huh. And they realized that they didn't ever actually say it, but because I actually found it. I got to go find a link again. It would be really fun to post, because they realized that Lambda, that there's absolutely no way with the way Python it does significant whitespace that they could ever add meaningful anonymous functions that have more than one line. And when they realized it, they just kind of like walked away from the thread and didn't talk about it anymore. We agreed to never talk about it again. I just thought it was so funny, because the entire language had been designed around other principles, and anonymous functions were never a core priority for Python, which is really sad, because Python is so good at so many other things. And, but anonymous, anybody who's done any C or anything related to C, they know. I mean, JavaScript is Lisp, or Scheme, basically. So you know how important anonymous functions are. They're super duper duper important. And I use them all the time. I'm so glad that I can use them. Through anonymous functions, you can actually change the behavior of something dynamically. And that, for the most part, is not possible as easily mean, you can do it, but you have to declare the function. You can't, you know. So anyway, I kind of went overboard on the whole closure thing, but that's a closure. Hopefully that will help you out a little bit.